I was lying in a hospital bed at 6 in the morning when a detective pulled a chair up next to me and set a photograph face down on the tray table. She didn't say anything right away. She just looked at me the way someone looks at you when they know something about your life that you haven't figured out yet. Then she flipped the photo over. It was a lease agreement. A studio apartment 40 minutes from my house in a town I'd never been to. My husband's name was on it. Signed 5 months ago. Paid for with a credit card I didn't know existed. And that wasn't even the part that broke me. The part that broke me was what the doctor had just told me 15 minutes earlier. That the reason I couldn't feel my legs, the reason I'd been falling apart for 7 months, the reason my hands shook and my vision blurred and my feet felt like they belonged to a stranger, was because someone had been poisoning me. Slowly. Carefully. In small doses. Every single night. In my tea. The tea my husband made for me without fail. Every night for 7 months. He never forgot. Not once. And I thought it was love. But I need to stop here because I'm getting ahead of myself and this story doesn't make sense unless you understand how I got to that hospital bed in the first place. It doesn't make sense unless you know who I was before all of this, who Gerald was, who his mother Patrice was, and what they spent years building around me so quietly that I didn't even realize I was trapped until my legs stopped working in front of 16 people and not a single one of them helped me off the ground. So let me take you back 7 months. To a Tuesday morning in April when the only thing wrong with my life, or so I thought, was a little tingling in my feet and a mother-in-law who wouldn't stop rearranging my kitchen. My name is Marlene. I'm 52 years old. And this is the story of how I almost died in the slowest, quietest way a person can. I live in Portage County, Ohio. Small town outside of Ravenna, the kind of place where people wave from their driveways and everybody knows whose truck is parked where it shouldn't be. I've worked as a medical records clerk at a regional hospital system for 11 years. My job is making sure patient files are coded right, insurance claims go through clean, and nobody's chart gets lost between departments. It's not glamorous. It pays $44,800 a year and I've earned every cent of it by sitting in a gray cubicle under fluorescent lights arguing with insurance adjusters who act like a colonoscopy is a luxury vacation. I met Gerald through a woman I worked with named Sheila. Sheila told me Gerald was solid. Dependable. The kind of man who shows up when he says he will and doesn't play games. He was a maintenance supervisor at a chemical supply warehouse about 25 minutes outside of town. Been there 9 years. Steady check. Good benefits. He drove a Ford F-150 that he kept clean and he remembered your name the first time you told him. When we started dating I was 45 and he was 49 and I'd been single long enough to stop believing in butterflies. Gerald didn't give me butterflies. He gave me something I thought was better. He gave me calm. He was attentive in the beginning. Not in a flashy way but in the ways that matter when you're a grown woman who's been through enough nonsense to know the difference. He'd fill my gas tank without being asked. He'd text me on his lunch break just to say he was thinking about me. He asked about my day and he actually listened, not the way some men listen where you can see their eyes glaze over after 30 seconds, but really listened. My mother, God rest her, would have called him a good one. We got married after 13 months. I know that's fast. But when you're in your mid-40s and someone makes you feel seen for the first time in years, you don't sit around waiting for a reason to say no. You say yes because you're tired of being careful and you want to believe that this time it's real. For the first year it was. Then Patrice showed up. Not showed up like she'd been absent. Patrice had always been around. But there's a difference between a mother who visits and a mother who moves in without a suitcase. Gerald gave her a key to our house about 14 months into the marriage. Didn't ask me. Just handed it to her at Sunday dinner like it was nothing. She used it. Lord, did she use it. I'd come home from a 9-hour shift and find her reorganizing my pantry because apparently I'd been storing canned goods wrong for 52 years and nobody had the decency to tell me. She critiqued my cooking. She rearranged my living room furniture and told Gerald it improved the flow. She had opinions about my hair, my clothes, the way I loaded the dishwasher, and the fact that I used store-bought pie crust instead of making it from scratch. According to Patrice, I was a woman who had somehow survived half a century on this earth without learning how to do a single thing correctly. And Gerald. Gerald's response was always the same. That's just Mom. She means well. Don't make it a thing, Marlene. So I didn't make it a thing. For 4 years I made absolutely nothing a thing. I smiled. I adjusted. I let Patrice move my grandmother's serving bowl to a shelf I couldn't reach, and I said nothing because keeping the peace was my whole identity. That's what women like me do. We absorb. We accommodate. We shrink ourselves one compromise at a time until the people around us forget we're even in the room. Then there was the money. About 2 years in, Gerald suggested we combine our bank accounts. Made sense, he said. We're a team. I agreed because that's what married people do. But here's what I started noticing. My check would hit on the 15th, and by the 23rd the balance was lower than it should have been. Groceries and utilities and the car payment didn't add up to what was disappearing. I brought it up once. Gerald told me I wasn't good with numbers. Which is a bold thing to say to a woman who reconciles insurance billing codes for a living. I let that go too. I let everything go. And that's the thing about being the person who never causes trouble. People start to believe you don't have the backbone to cause any. Which makes you the perfect target for what comes next. 7 months before I ended up in that hospital bed, my body started trying to warn me. I didn't listen at first. None of us do. We tell ourselves it's stress, it's age, it's nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Month 1. April. A tingling in my feet after work. Not pain exactly, more like static. That pins and needles feeling you get when you sit on your leg too long at a movie theater. It happened every evening. I mentioned it to Gerald and he said I was probably sitting wrong at my desk. I believed him because why wouldn't I? Month 2. The fatigue hit. And I don't mean tired. I mean the kind of exhaustion where you come home from work, sit on the couch to take your shoes off, and the next thing you know it's dark outside and you've missed dinner entirely. I was dragging through my shifts. Making errors on files I could normally process in my sleep. Me. A woman who hadn't miscoded a claim in 4 years. Patrice heard about the fatigue from Gerald and said, and I quote, "Women her age just don't have the constitution they used to." This from a 74-year-old woman who needed to sit down after carrying a casserole dish from her car to the kitchen counter. But sure, Patrice. I'm the one lacking stamina. Month 3. A vision episode at work. I was in the middle of reviewing a patient chart and the screen went blurry. Not a little blurry. Gone. Like looking through a shower door. It lasted almost a full minute and then cleared like nothing happened. I sat at my desk with my heart pounding and my hands gripping the edge of my keyboard, and I knew something was wrong with me. I tried to schedule a doctor's appointment. That's when I discovered Gerald had never added me to his health insurance after he switched positions at the warehouse 8 months earlier. He told me he'd handle it. I reminded him twice. He didn't handle it. I know now that wasn't carelessness. A wife without insurance is a wife without medical records. A wife without medical records is a wife whose symptoms don't exist on paper. Month 4. My legs buckled in the bathroom. No warning. 1 second I was standing, the next I was grabbing the towel rack to keep from cracking my head on the edge of the tub. I told Gerald. He said the bath mat was probably slippery and that I should buy a new one. I started keeping a flashlight on my nightstand in case my legs gave out in the middle of the night. That sounds paranoid until it saves you from falling face first into a dresser at 2 in the morning. Month 5. The numbness climbed past my ankles. My feet felt like they were wrapped in something thick, like they belonged to somebody else. I stopped waiting for Gerald to fix the insurance situation. I called a clinic myself and made an appointment. Paid $310 out of pocket. Cash. From a savings account at a separate credit union that Gerald didn't know about. $2,300 in it. My mother told me when I was 26 years old, every woman needs money in a place no one else can touch. I never understood why she said it with such weight in her voice until the day I handed those bills to a receptionist and realized it was the only money in the world that was truly mine. The doctor ordered blood work. The results weren't back yet when everything fell apart. Months 6 and 7. The tingling became numbness. The numbness became weakness. I started dropping things. A coffee mug. A stack of files at work. My grip wasn't right. And through all of it, every single night, Gerald made my tea. Let me say that again because I need you to understand how this felt. Every single night for 7 months, my husband made me a cup of chamomile tea before bed. He never missed. Not once. This was a man who forgot our anniversary, who couldn't remember to pick up bread on the way home if I didn't text him 3 times, who once left a load of laundry in the washer so long it grew something I had to throw the whole batch away. But the tea he never forgot. About 7 months ago it started tasting a little different. Not bad. Just a faint bitterness underneath the chamomile that wasn't there before. I mentioned it and Gerald said he switched brands because the old one got expensive. Made sense. I shrugged it off. I thought it was kindness. I thought my husband was taking care of me in his own quiet way. Turns out his quiet way was something I wouldn't have believed if a stranger told me. I had to hear it from a doctor at 6 in the morning with a detective sitting next to my bed. And while my body was breaking down, Gerald was doing something else entirely. About 4 months before I collapsed, he started telling people I was becoming anxious. Obsessed with being sick. Fragile. He used soft words. Concerned words. I'm honestly a little worried about her, like mentally. He told his buddies. He told Patrice, who of course told everyone she knew. He even told my sister June. My own sister. June called me one evening and asked carefully, gently, like she was handling something breakable, if I was doing okay. Not physically. In my head. My sister. The woman who knew me better than anyone on this earth had been convinced by my husband that I was losing my grip on reality. That's the thing about this kind of manipulation. It doesn't just fool the person it's being done to. It fools every single person around them. By the time you realize what's happening, you're already surrounded by people who've been told not to believe you. It was the Saturday before Thanksgiving. Gerald's family always did their big gathering early because Patrice insisted on keeping the actual holiday for her side only. Which really meant Patrice sitting at the head of the table being praised for a turkey she overseasoned every year, but nobody dared say so. Patrice had spent 4 days decorating our house. Streamers. A tablecloth ordered online. A centerpiece of fake autumn leaves and ceramic pumpkins arranged with the precision of a woman defusing a bomb. She'd even made a seating chart. For 16 people. At a backyard potluck. Because Patrice believed that without her supervision, human beings could not be trusted to sit in chairs. I'd been feeling terrible all week. Legs heavy. Vision blurred twice at work on Thursday. Barely sleeping. But I was trying. I got dressed, helped set up, drove to Moretti's on Route 14 and picked up a $65 baked ziti tray. Gerald's favorite. I was carrying that tray across the driveway toward the side gate. Maybe 10 steps from the backyard. And my legs just stopped. No stumble. No warning. They switched off like someone flipped a breaker inside me. I went down. The tray hit first, then my knees, then my face. Baked ziti everywhere. Cheek on cold concrete. And below my waist, absolutely nothing. I tried to move my toes and it was like trying to operate someone else's body. I was on the ground and I could not get up. Gerald was at the smoker when he heard the crash. He came around the side of the house and I need you to hear this. He walked. Did not rush. Did not jog. Walked. And the first words out of his mouth were not "Are you okay?" He said, "Marlene, get up. You're making a scene." I told him I couldn't feel my legs. Clearly. Gerald, something is wrong, I cannot feel my legs. His face didn't shift to worry. It shifted to irritation. Like I was being inconvenient. He turned to the guests and said, she does this. Give her a minute. One of his co-workers, a big guy in a Browns hoodie, started toward me. Basic human decency. Gerald waved him off. She's fine, Dave. 16 people at that gathering. Not one of them helped me. That's what months of being called dramatic buys you. Then Patrice came through the gate. Hands on hips. She looked down at me on the concrete and said loud enough for the whole street to hear, I knew she'd pull something. She always has to make everything about herself. I spent 4 days on this party. 4 days on ceramic pumpkins. Couldn't spare 4 seconds to wonder if something was actually wrong with me. Gerald went back to the smoker. Patrice followed. Music kept playing from the patio speaker. I lay there for about 2 full minutes thinking this is how it ends. Face down. Invisible. Surrounded by people who decided a long time ago I wasn't worth believing. Then I heard the siren. Someone had called 911. I never found out who. But that sound cutting through the music and the laughter from the backyard was the only thing telling me I wasn't completely alone. The ambulance pulled up at 3:52. A woman stepped out. Short hair, late 40s, built like someone who'd spent 20 years lifting stretchers. Her tag said Briggs. Connie Briggs. She read my driveway the way a mechanic reads an engine, not by what was making noise but by what was too quiet. Connie knelt beside me. Gloves on. Standard checks. Pin prick on my legs. Reflex hammer. Light in my eyes. Zero sensation below my hips. She tapped my knee and got nothing. Not reduced. Nothing. Her face stayed calm but I watched her write more than a standard intake requires. She asked when symptoms started. 7 months. Medications. None. Insurance. None. Changes in diet. I mentioned the tea. The taste. Gerald making it every night. She didn't react. She just wrote it down. But her pen slowed on the word tea. And she underlined something I couldn't see from the ground. Gerald came back around front once the ambulance showed up. Couldn't ignore flashing lights in his own driveway. He stood 5 feet away, arms crossed, and started talking to Connie. Not to me. She's been like this for months. It's stress. You might want to check her anxiety. Connie asked him to step back. He didn't move. She asked again. Same calm voice, no room for negotiation. Gerald said this is my property and she's my wife. Connie looked at him for a long moment and said she needed space to assess her patient. She picked up her radio and requested police to the scene. Family member interfering with patient assessment. Standard protocol. Gerald stiffened at the word police but Connie played it cool. Just procedure, sir. He backed off. They loaded me in. Gerald didn't ride along. Said he had guests to handle. Patrice was already telling everyone I'd be fine by morning. I lay on that stretcher staring at the ceiling and Connie Briggs, checking my vitals beside me, said one thing that wasn't medical, you're not imagining this. I want you to know that right now. That was the first time in 7 months another person told me what I was feeling was real. Before I tell you what they found in my blood, I need to ask you something real quick. If this story already has your heart pounding, hit that subscribe button for me. I post stories like this every week, real stories, broken down so we can all learn something from them. Hit subscribe and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I read every single one and it means more than you know. Now let me tell you what happened at that hospital. Things moved fast and slow at the same time. I was wheeled in, scanned, stuck with needles, hooked to monitors. The ER doctor was a tired-looking man in his 30s who listened to Connie's handoff notes with a lot more attention than you'd expect for a leg numbness case. Because Connie had flagged something. She'd pulled him aside and explained what she observed at the scene. Progressive nerve symptoms matching a timeline with a dietary change. A husband whose behavior didn't match genuine concern. She recommended expanded toxicology. The doctor agreed and ordered a full MRI of my spine plus a comprehensive tox screen, the kind they don't run unless they're specifically looking for something. Gerald showed up 3.5 hours later. 3.5 hours. He walked into my room, didn't ask what the doctor said, didn't look at the monitors, didn't ask if I was in pain. He asked when I'd be discharged because the house was a mess from the party and Patrice was upset. Then he sat in the corner chair and scrolled his phone for 20 minutes. I watched my husband thumb through what I'm fairly sure was a fantasy football group chat while I lay there unable to feel my own legs. A nurse came in around 9 that night. She asked the standard screening question. "Do you feel safe at home?" She asked it slowly. She held eye contact. She waited. I said yes. Automatically. The way you do. But that question lodged itself in my chest like a splinter I couldn't pull out. After Gerald left, I had nothing but time and my phone. I logged into our joint account. The $1,500 was still labeled furnace repair. But now I noticed something I'd missed. Small ATM withdrawals. $60 at a time. From a machine in Ashtabula, Ohio. We don't live in Ashtabula. We don't shop there. I don't know a soul in Ashtabula. The withdrawals went back 5 months. Regular as clockwork. I didn't sleep. Around 6 in the morning the door opened. The doctor walked in and behind him were 2 people I'd never seen. A woman in scrubs who introduced herself as the patient advocate. And a woman in a dark blazer with a badge clipped to her belt. The doctor pulled a chair close to my bed and sat down. Doctors don't pull up chairs for good news. They pull up chairs when they need you to be still for what's coming. The badge belonged to Detective Ruth Ann Okafor, Portage County Sheriff's Office. Mid-40s. No-nonsense face. She sat in the plastic visitor chair like she'd done this 100 times. The doctor explained the MRI first. Progressive damage to my peripheral nervous system. The protective coating around my nerves was being stripped away. The pattern wasn't consistent with MS, wasn't autoimmune, wasn't degenerative disease. The pattern was chemical. Something had been destroying my nerves from the inside for months. Then the toxicology. They found trichloroethylene in my blood. If you don't know what that is, I didn't either. It's an industrial degreasing solvent. The kind of chemical used in manufacturing plants and maintenance operations. The kind of chemical a maintenance supervisor at a chemical supply warehouse would handle every single day. The levels in my blood were not from one accidental exposure. They were consistent with repeated small doses over an extended period. Someone had been feeding it to me. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I went completely still. You know that moment when your brain gets information so far outside anything it's ever considered that it just freezes. Like a computer hitting an error it wasn't built for. That was me. The man who handed me tea every night. Who said goodnight, babe. Who kissed my forehead before work some mornings. That man had been putting industrial solvent in my chamomile. Detective Okafor let the silence sit. Then she started asking questions. When did the tea change? Who made it? How often? What did Gerald do for work? When I said chemical supply warehouse, she wrote something down and underlined it twice. She asked about the finances. The credit card. The insurance policy I didn't know about. She told me they'd already begun the warrant process for our house. I want to stop the story here for just a moment. The search warrant hit our house that same afternoon. In Gerald's workshop in the garage, behind a shelf of old paint cans and a bowling ball he hadn't touched in 6 years, they found a half-empty container of industrial-grade trichloroethylene. His employer confirmed Gerald had been signing out that compound for 7 months. Consistently more than his maintenance role required. His supervisor never questioned it because Gerald had been there 9 years and was considered one of the reliable ones. That's the thing about trust. It makes the perfect hiding place. The financial forensics came next, and they came fast. That credit card with the $8,200 balance traced to 2 things. First, monthly premiums on a $400,000 life insurance policy taken out on me 8 months ago. Simplified issue. No medical exam required. My signature on the application was forged. Second, rent on a studio apartment in Ashtabula, Ohio. 360 square feet with a view of a tire shop parking lot. Signed 5 months ago under Gerald's name. Those ATM withdrawals I found from my hospital bed. All within 2 blocks of that apartment. Gerald wasn't just trying to collect insurance money. He was building an entire second life. Ready to step into it the moment I was gone. His big escape plan was a sad little studio in Ashtabula with carpet that probably smelled like the previous tenant. The man really did lack imagination. Then Detective Okafor showed me Patrice's text messages. One by one they looked like a nosy mother checking on her son. But laid out on a timeline they were devastating. She brought up the doctor thing again at dinner. Heads up. She's been looking at the bank statements. Be careful. The party's Saturday, she better not pull anything in front of people. Patrice wasn't just a difficult mother-in-law. She was a surveillance system. Monitoring my suspicions and feeding Gerald real-time intelligence. She knew about the tea. She knew what was in it. She helped manage the whole operation from her living room 8 minutes away. That's the one that broke me. Not Gerald. I could almost file Gerald under greed and cowardice. But Patrice was a 74-year-old woman. A mother. She stood over me on that driveway and accused me of faking while she knew exactly why I couldn't move. She watched me fall apart for 7 months, and her only concern was that I might see a doctor before the job was done. They arrested Gerald at 5:52 the next morning. 3 unmarked cars on our street. He opened the door in gym shorts and a faded t-shirt from some chili cook-off 2 summers back. Saw the badge and his face did something Detective Okafor described to me later. Not shock. Recognition. The look of a man who'd been waiting for a knock he hoped would never come. He said 4 words. I want a lawyer. Not I didn't do it. Not this is a mistake. He asked for a lawyer the way a man grabs a life jacket when the boat's already underwater. 12 minutes later officers arrived at Patrice's house. Neat lawn. Flag on the porch. The kind of house that says respectable woman lives here. She opened the door in a bathrobe and tried to close it when she saw the badges. An officer put his foot in the gap. She was arrested as an accessory to attempted murder. Unlike Gerald, Patrice screamed. Called it a lie. Said her Gerald would never. Her neighbor Dolores was outside walking her dog at 6 in the morning because Dolores was that kind of neighbor and saw the whole thing. Their defenses collapsed against each other within a week. Gerald's angle was my mother pressured me. Patrice's angle was I had no idea what he was doing. Those 2 stories can't both be true in the same courtroom. Their shared attorney dropped them both. Conflict of interest. Now they each needed separate lawyers, cheaper ones, because every asset was frozen. Gerald was denied bail. The forged policy, the secret apartment, the signed-out solvents, premeditation and flight risk. He sat in a county detention cell wearing orange. But the real blow came last. Detective Okafor told me they'd pulled the old case file on Gerald's father. A man named Raymond Dunlap. Died in October 2008 at age 51. Cause of death, progressive neurological failure of undetermined origin. Sick for approximately 6 months before he died. Tingling. Fatigue. Loss of motor function. No toxicology was ordered. It was 2008. He was a middle-aged man and his wife was a retired cafeteria worker. Nobody looked twice. The DA authorized a full reinvestigation including possible exhumation. The symptoms in Raymond's records were nearly identical to mine. Same timeline. Same household. If Patrice did this before, she didn't just help Gerald. She taught him. The tea. The microdoses. The patience. The gaslighting. This wasn't a son's idea that his mother helped with. This was a mother's method, handed down like a recipe. The most terrifying family tradition I have ever heard of. With the poisoning stopped, my body started fighting back. The neurologist told me straight. Peripheral nerves can regenerate but slowly. About an inch a month. Some of the damage from 7 months of exposure might be permanent. I might always have some numbness in my feet. I told her I could live with that. I was alive. Which was more than Gerald had planned for. The first 2 weeks were the hardest. Not physically. Emotionally. I lay in that bed processing the fact that my husband had been trying to kill me with my bedtime tea. That's not something they make a greeting card for. There's no sorry your spouse tried to poison you aisle at Hallmark. Though honestly it'd probably sell better than you'd think. But my body was healing. Sensation came back to my upper legs first. That warm prickly feeling like blood returning to a limb that fell asleep. Then my knees. Then my shins. After 3 weeks I stood up in the hospital corridor for the first time. 5 steps. My sister June was beside me holding my arm, crying. But the good kind this time. 5 steps doesn't sound like much. But when the last time you were standing you were collapsing onto a driveway while your husband rolled his eyes, 5 steps feels like crossing a finish line. I kept going. 7 steps the next day. Then 15. Then the whole hallway. The physical therapist said I was ahead of schedule, which I appreciated because I have never once in my life been ahead of schedule for anything. The legal side moved fast. Gerald faced attempted first-degree murder, assault, insurance fraud, and forgery. 15 to 25 years. His employer fired him immediately and turned over every solvent record from the past 2 years. Turns out companies cooperate real fast when the alternative is being named in a poisoning investigation. Patrice was charged as accessory to attempted murder with the 2008 case under active reinvestigation. If those charges stuck, her situation went from bad to catastrophic. The $400,000 policy was voided. The forged signature alone was a separate felony. My divorce attorney filed for emergency dissolution and full asset recovery. Under Ohio law, when a spouse commits a felony against you, the court doesn't split things 50-50. It splits them in your direction. The house. The savings. The $1,500 Gerald stole for furnace repairs that never happened. Total assets recovered, roughly $203,000 including house equity. Not a fortune. But every single dollar was mine. I sold the house 2 months later. I didn't want to live on a street where I'd been face down on the driveway while 16 people watched and did nothing. I found a small apartment in Kent, Ohio. 12 minutes from June. Nothing fancy. 1 bedroom. A kitchen with enough counter space to make my own tea. A window that gets afternoon light. I went back to work at the hospital. Same commute. Same files. Same insurance companies arguing about colonoscopies. But I make my own tea now. And some nights I skip it entirely just because I can. I adopted a one-eyed cat from a rescue in Akron. Orange Tabby, missing his left eye from an infection before he was found. I named him Verdict. I know it's a little on the nose. I know it makes people smile and shake their head. I don't care. He sits on my lap every evening in that apartment in Kent, purring like a small engine. He doesn't care what his name is. He just cares that someone chose him. Sometimes the people screaming at you to stand up are the same ones who put you on the ground. And sometimes you have to fall all the way down before you finally see who's really standing over you. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this one. I know it was heavy. Here's what I want you to know about this channel. Every story I share here comes from real people on forums like Reddit and Quora. I change the names, the places, the details, and I add a little bit of fiction to protect their privacy. But the bones of every story are real. And I break them down psychologically so that you and I can learn something. So that if we ever see these patterns in our own lives or in the lives of people we love, we recognize them before it's too late. If this story meant something to you, hit that subscribe button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more, my best stories are already on your screen right now. Pick one and I'll see you in just a moment.